Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth of 5 Life of a Book panel sessions. I am Christine Bell. I will give a quick audio description. I am a white woman in her 40s with long, straight dark hair and glasses, and I am sitting in a virtual background of the stone-walled living room in the main house at Moniac Moor. I look after projects at Moniac Moor, Scotland's Creative Writing Centre, and we have had the really exciting job of bringing to life the idea for these sessions, which was developed by Creative Scotland and is funded through Creative Scotland's National Lottery and is also being supported by Hawthornden Foundation and Society of Authors. So the Life of a Book programme's aim is to demystify the journey of creating a book, from writing it through querying and working with agents and publishers to what happens after the book has been published and how we can co-create a community that supports writers at every stage. Today is a really interesting panel exploring what happens after your book has been published. Shortly, we will be welcoming Adam Barclay, Anna Frame, Ryan van Winkle and Hannah Lavery as chair. But before I hand over to Hannah, please bear with me for a wee bit of online housekeeping. If you're watching the recording or have heard me say this in the previous sessions, please forgive the repetition and thank you for your patience. So to view the captions, select the CC icon along the very bottom of the Zoom screen and select Show Captions, or you can select Hide Captions to switch it off. Alternatively, if you click the wee dots or arrow beside the CC icon, you can choose to view transcript and it will show the transcript in a separate window. These events are being recorded. As this is a webinar, the audience is not visible to the panelists and are not being recorded, and your video and mic are automatically switched off. The recordings will be available via Moniac's website a few weeks after the events, because we are adding BSL interpretation to the recordings, hence the delay. So any books, websites, podcasts and the like that are referenced during the discussion will be compiled and added to the transcript of the event and will be available with the recording. And we will notify everyone who attended when those are available as well. So my colleague, Angela Cran, is here as tech support. So if you have any technical difficulties during the event, you can contact her either using the chat or the email or phone number that she will drop into the chat now. If for any reason there's any connection issues with the internet, then please do just try and rejoin on the same link. So we may not be able to see you all, but we would still really love to hear from you. So along the bottom of your screens, you will see a Q&A function and a chat function. The Q&A will open halfway through the discussion for any additional questions directly to the panel, and we'll do our best to pick up as many as we can. But we would love to hear any other comments or reactions in the chat as we go along. So you will be delighted to hear that's enough from me. And I am happy now to introduce you to our chair, Hannah Lavery. Hannah is a poet and playwright from Edinburgh, named by Owen Shears as one of the 10 writers asking questions that will shape our future. Her debut poetry collection, Blood Salt Spring from Polygon, was nominated for a Saltire Prize in 2022 and named as one of the Poetry Society Books of the Year. Hannah is the current Macker, or Poet Laureate for the City of Edinburgh and a former associate artist with the National Theatre of Edinburgh, and her new book, Unwritten Woman, will be coming out from Berlin in August, so look out for that. Welcome, Hannah.
Hello. It was the National Theatre of Scotland, but I like the idea of a National Theatre of Edinburgh. I think.
What did I say? Sorry. Sorry.
No, I liked it. I was like, oh, National Theatre of Edinburgh, which definitely is.
Start something.
Thank you so much, and hello, everybody. Welcomed to what I think will be a really interesting and hopefully useful conversation. My name is Hannah Lavery, and I will start by introducing our wonderful panel. Just so we know the kind of format for today, we're going to have a discussion, then we're going to open to some questions that have already been sent in, and then we'll open up to the questions for the Q&A. So if you've got questions, do put them into the Q&A or save them up for when the Q&A opens. So welcome, Adam, Anna and Ryan. I'm going to just do a little bit of bio before I pose a question. So we'll start with Anna. Anna Frame is Communications Director at Canongate Books, an award-winning publicist with more than 15 years' experience. She has run a wide variety of campaigns and events across almost every genre, with career highlights including Amy Liprott's The Outrun. She's also chair of the Publishers Publicity Circle, a recipient of the Booksellers Association Sophie Christopher Publicist of the Year Award. Oh, it's quite a lot to say. And a trustee of the Edinburgh International Book Festival. The publicity team she manages pride themselves on promoting Canongate's titles creatively, collaboratively, and effectively, with campaigns that put author care at their heart. And we'll talk a bit about that later. I just remembered I'm supposed to give you a visual description of myself. So I am a mixed race woman in her 40s. You know, who's in a nice room in her house that is tidy. Okay, so that was Anna, and also me. So Adam Barclay has been a bookseller for over 10 years, working for Waterstones and Blackwell's, and was previously the book sales and logistics manager for the Edinburgh International Book Festival. He is the owner and manager of Leith's Argonaut Books, which has just celebrated its 2-year anniversary. And finally, Ryan. Ryan van Winkle is an award-winning author, artist, and producer based in Edinburgh. He is currently the artistic director of StAnza, Scotland's International Poetry Festival. He has been a writer-in-residence at the University of Edinburgh, the Citizen Schools Writer-in-Residence at the Edinburgh International Festival, and the Reader-in-Residence at the Scottish Poetry Library. His second poetry collection, The Good Dark, won the Solitaire Society's 2015 Poetry Book of the Year Award, and his poems have appeared in the American Poetry Review, the Modern Poetry in Translation, and New Writing Scotland. He was awarded the Jessie Kesson Fellowship at Moniac Moor in 2018. So that's enough of me reading out bios. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all well. I was going to start off by asking a question for everyone that I thought would be useful, which is you've got these incredibly had these incredibly varied careers, but I was kind of thinking it might be interesting for us all to find out what your day-to-day is in your current role. So what I'll do is I think we'll go with Anna, Adam, and Ryan. Is that okay in that order? So yeah, so Anna, what is it to be a communications director? What do you do every day?
Well, so I'll give audio description first. So I'm a white woman in, let's charitably say, my mid to late 30s, with short, dark, curly hair, and I'm sitting against a backdrop of bookshelves of which I'm disproportionately proud. My day-to-day, I mean, the boring answer to that is a lot of emails. I spend a lot of time on email. The more fun bit of my job is out and about with authors. My overarching role as communications director, I'm a publicist primarily. So my job is to help get Canongate's books and writers into the media, whether that's magazines, newspapers, radio, TVs, and also events, whether that's with bookshops like Argonauts or festival events, or sometimes with kind of private companies and things like that as well. Basically just helping get the books into readers' hands as much as I can. That also means that my job involves working probably more closely with writers than any other person in publishing other than maybe the editorial team. I think for most writers, their primary relationships are with their editor and their agent, but the publicist is often the one who's sort of there on the ground at the point that the book is going out into the world, which is a deeply vulnerable and scary time, I think, for a lot of writers, as well as being very exciting. And so my role involves a lot of that sort of people management, expectation management, and sort of helping be a support for writers at that very, very, very vulnerable time as well.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Adam.
Hello, I'm Adam. I'm a white man wearing a yellow hat in a big empty room. I'm older than 30 and younger than 40. I think my role these days is very different to what it used to be. I think I'm going through a bit of a transitional time. I am the manager of the bookshop, but also the owner, trying to take a little bit of a step back. But I think for the vast majority of my working life, I have been a frontline coalface bookseller. We are the people who get books into hands. We're often people's first contact with a book. Maybe they've come across it in an advert. Maybe they've come across it on a podcast. But a lot of the time, we will be introducing your books to the people who will be reading them for the first time, getting them excited about it, giving them brief descriptions, no spoilers, but yeah, we are the people who make it happen at the very, very end of the pipeline. We're the people who sort of, take a book off the shelf, get it into a hand, and hopefully convince somebody to buy it.
Nice. Ryan.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Ryan. I'm a white man, about 46 years old, salt and pepper hair, I think, still, and a ever graying beard, wearing a blue check flannel shirt over a black t-shirt. And my day-to-day, I don't know, it changes all the time, it feels like. I'm not really good with consistency, which is probably useful for my job in some ways. If I'm home and in Edinburgh, I'm probably working on some sort of funding application, because that seems to be the majority of the job out with the festival time, is essentially running a small and failing business where you're trying to get money all the time. But then occasionally I'm at a festival, and then those days are great, and they're filled up with going to see events and talking to poets and, having little coffee meetings and finding out what people are working on. And then in general, any extra time I have, I'm going to events in the evening. I'm reading about what people are up to. Obviously, I want to say answering emails. I'm going to say reading emails, and feeling guilty about not answering them enough. But yeah. But I do read them. And I really appreciate you writing.
I think sometimes we answer them in our heads, but they don't actually arrive in any.
Yeah, I think a lot of that happens to me. I'm like, oh, I know what to say, but I can't be bothered to write it down. Yeah, maybe I need the Neuralink.
So I want to follow up a little bit with that. So obviously today we've got writers that have joined us that are thinking about the kind of post-publication phase. So they all have a book in their hands or about to be in their hands, and they want it to be in other people's hands. And I imagine they're coming from a variety of different things where, for example, they might have a publicity team and be with a publisher like Canongate. They might be with a much smaller publisher where they have like one person or no person or half a person, or person is 1 day a week, or they might be having to promote it completely themselves. So I was thinking it would be really interesting, Anna, to hear about what goes in and how you design a campaign for a book from the Canongate point of view, and then maybe to kind of offer advice for those people that don't necessarily have a big publicity team. But how do you go about designing that campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, without wanting to sound simplistic about it, the first question is you always have to ask yourself is, who are you trying to reach? I think there's a classic line, everyone wants their book to be read by everyone. Like, that is understandable. That's completely fair. But it probably makes sense to try and start somewhere and be really clear on who it is that you want your readers to be. Who do you think is most likely to want to pick up your book? And this always sounds fairly brutal, but why should they care? Why should they spend their money, their time on your book as opposed to someone else's, or as opposed to a series on Netflix or A Walk in the Sunshine or whatever else it happens to be? What is it about your book that means that someone else will care about it as much as you do? And I think that's often a really hard question for writers, because you spend so long crafting this thing that you care about so deeply that of course everyone's going to care about it. But the thing is, and they may well, but you need to persuade them to pick it up in the first place. And so at Canongate, we don't have sort of certain channels that we put each book down. We don't have a sort of a memoir route and a nature writing route. We start every single time with the book and we build a campaign from scratch. And so we look at that question of who are our readers and how do we reach them? And also, where do our authors' strengths lie? So is it that this author is a brilliant speaker and we want to get them out and about into bookshops around the country doing events? Do they have an amazing personal story that they write about in their book that maybe we can kind of pitch to a broadsheet or a magazine or something like that? Do they have, if it's a novel that has elements of nonfiction in it that maybe they can write about? We've got a brilliant writer, Katie Hale, who's got a book coming out in July, which is set in the near future after the collapse of the Antarctic Treaty. And so I'm talking to her about pieces that she can maybe write about, the eco-crisis, particularly tapping into Shackleton's, the anniversary of Shackleton's birth, which is 150 years this year. Are there hooks? Are there anniversaries? Are there bigger worldwide topics you can tap into, whether your book is fiction or nonfiction? And I think whether you've got a publicist or not, those are really, really helpful things to think about. Just that question of effectively, how do you make someone care about your book? And what is it you want to say about your book? What is it you want people to take away when they've read it? How do you connect with people and get them to persuade them to pick it up? Because even if you have a big publicity team, if you're clear on those things before you go into your first meeting with them, it's going to help them no end, but also it's going to make sure that the book is getting out there in a way that you feel comfortable and happy with. I think a lot of writers can feel real pressure to mine their personal histories for deeply emotional, very personal stories that will help their PR teams get them into the press. And that's understandable because there are fewer and fewer straight book slots left. And so publicists will ask about personal stories. And if you've got them, that's great. But if you've thought about it before, there might actually be other angles that feel more comfortable and actually fit the book better that will help you get out there. And so, yeah, I think in terms of kind of working with a PR team, I think basically it's that thing of like kind of be clear on who you want to talk to and how. Ask the hard questions up front. Don't be afraid to ask those hard questions. Don't be afraid to set boundaries. You know, if you've written a memoir, you aren't telling your life story, you are telling a story. You will have chosen to leave some things in and take some things out. And it's really, really important that writers understand that doesn't become moot as soon as you go into a studio or start telling your story in other forms. You don't have to give away everything. So, and again, the clearer you are with your publishers and where your boundaries are early, the better. And I think also just kind of assume that everyone's working in good faith. I think publishing has a terrible, terrible habit of going quiet. It's really bad. Communication is not as good in publishing as it should be. That's partly because everyone has got too much to do and everyone's frantically trying to get stuff done. But I think often to writers, that can feel a lot like nothing's happening. And I think it's really okay for us. It's really okay to ask for updates. It's really okay to ask for more information. It's okay to push back on things, but assume that people are acting in good faith and that they probably are working hard to get your book out there. And kind of go from there. And then I think if you haven't got a publisher, it is harder, but you can absolutely approach, you know, magazines and newspapers, particularly local press, directly. But again, you have to think about it from the editor's perspective or the journalist's perspective. What is the story you're giving them? They are also massively overworked. They haven't got enough time. You need to slightly spoon feed them the angle if you want to get feedback. If you just tell them, hi, I've got a book, can you cover it? They're probably not going to come back to you because they're getting 1,000 emails a day. That's a lot to begin with.
And also I was going to, like, the tip for local press is often that you can just send them the thing they want to put in the newspaper because they got like...
It can be the case. Yeah, it can be. Like, you know, if you get a really strong press release, but put together a really good press release that has bullet points. Like, God love us, use bullet points. You know, it's find the angles, find the hooks, think about it from the perspective of the person you're talking to. Because again, I think it's a really, really natural thing, but it's a terrible habit that most writers have, to be honest, or take some time to come out of, which is you're so in this book and in this world, whether that's fiction or nonfiction, it takes time and practice and effort to pull yourself back out and look at it as something that, as a reader, as a journalist, whoever it is, they have never heard of this. They need to be persuaded.
Nice. Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think I was wondering when you were talking about that idea of when you work for a small publisher that maybe doesn't have someone who's in a full-time role. I mean, would you advise the writer to come in and kind of design a campaign with that publicist or look at what they can offer? Or is it about being more proactive, do you think, with smaller?
I think, I mean, every publisher and every publicist will have a different approach. And I think it's about having a conversation. Again, I think we can overcomplicate this slightly. Like there is no right and wrong. You know, there are no firm rules with this stuff because it's all just people trying to do their best to get books out into the world. But I don't think any publicist or any publisher is going to be offended if you come in and say, so I've been thinking about this and I was thinking about these different angles. How can I be helpful? I've already spoken to these people. Do you think it's worth my doing this or do you want to handle it?
Yeah.
No one's going to, you know, again, if you don't come in with the assumption that people aren't doing their jobs, you come in with the assumption that everyone wants to do their jobs, but everyone's also time poor.
And I think that's why it's really useful to hear you talk about what your job is. I think sometimes with writers, they don't really know who's doing what people are doing or what they're supposed to do or what their kind of role is. So thank you for that, Anna. I'm gonna so we've got the book, we've got the publicist. Now we wanted to get it in a bookshop. So I'm following the journey of this book, Adam. So you've worked for Waterstones, you've worked for sort of and you know, and Blackwell's, and you're now running a kind of independent, I mean, it's with the role independent, but you're now running Argonauts and you're the manager. And I suppose what I'm interested in, and I'm hoping that other people want to know this, is what is that relationship between a writer and a bookseller, and how does a writer develop that relationship? What advice have you got about sort of promoting your book to a bookseller?
Yeah, I think going back to a lifetime ago when I was at Waterstones, it's a very different environment. You are, when you're a ground level bookseller, you don't get a lot of say about what books are stocked. If you're in a sort of smaller Waterstones, you're kind of selling what's there, and that's sort of fed down from on high. And I think the buyers at Waterstones, those are the people that Anna's publicity campaigns will also be appealing to, which is you'll be looking to catch the attention of these buyers who are making big seismic decisions about what's going to be stocked in potentially hundreds of bookshops across the country. And then by the time that feeds down to the bookseller level, if it's a book of the month, you might get a copy to read. You might, it might be on the tail, it might be something that you're encouraged to sell, but otherwise you're given a lot of freedom to talk about the books you care about. And I think there is absolutely no harm if, everyone hopefully would have a local bookshop, whether it's a Waterstones, whether it's an indie. We get a lot of authors who are on their journey, just had something coming out, have something coming out, and they just stop in to say hello. And it's a conversation. It is, you might start as strangers, but you're going to be having some kind of working relationship, whether it's, parasocial or not, is, drop an email to your local bookshop, make them aware of the book that's coming out. Often the times you've got to find the signal in the noise. There's a lot of books coming out all the time. And it's the people who drop in, say hello, make themselves known to you, that they're the ones who stick in your memory. And I think as well, similar to what Anna was saying, when it comes to spoon feed, everyone is time poor, but everyone is enthusiastic and cares about books and wants people to read. And I think, at the point of sale, you might only have a couple of minutes or even less to sell someone on a book. And if you've got a quick way of describing your book that a bookseller can latch onto and then use to talk directly to the customer, that's really helpful for us. And it's, even if that's something that came out of a 5-minute conversation, there's a few that I remember as well. We've had authors drop in over the years. And, when they're encouraged to do their elevator pitch to you, the bookshop, they maybe did for the publisher, that helps us massively sell it, because realistically, no one can read every book, but we can know a little bit about every single book in the shop. When we've read it and it's our favorite, super easy to sell. But at the same time, when you're selling volumetrically, like you might in a big Waterstones, you can have your, that hook ready to come out of your head and be like, oh, I would recommend this for your 12-year-old. It's a dark action, maybe sort of elements of Philip Pullman about it. Comparisons are helpful, maybe sometimes reductive, but those are the things that get people's emotions out when it comes to, you're trying to get someone to engage and form a relationship with the book that they've not read yet, but that you are being very excited about. And I think that's the trick to book selling, is excitement. And I think, basically forming relationships with your bookshops can be many forms. It can be ringing up. It can be maybe when your book is already there, drop in, say hello, sign a copy. Or when you're working with a publisher, you might do something called a proof drop. Proof drop is when you get an early copy of your book and you can hand deliver it to a bookshop. And that's a really nice way of, making that connection. It's like, oh, here's my face, here's my book. And suddenly to that bookseller, it's not just a book that has arrived in the shop. It is, here's someone and their work. And then maybe they can give you a little something about it that you wouldn't get from the press release. And, you feel like you have a special connection to that one too. But yeah, I think even if you've not published something yet, say hello to your local bookshop and say, I'm a writer, I'd love to be in your bookshop one day.
Nice. And is it useful to, so when it comes to like book signings and events and launches, so if you've not, so I'm imagining when you have a publisher, maybe, that like someone like an Anna's role might sort out your launch, but in terms of just like wanting to sign some books or something, is that quite easy to arrange if you turn up and your book?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's always good to check if your book is there. I think we've all been there, where it is someone's like, oh, hey, I'm an author and I've stopped in to sign your book, and whoops, you sold the last copy 2 days ago and you didn't get it back in. So it's always good to give a heads up, but at the same time, no bookshop is ever going to be unhappy to see an author dropping in to sign their books if they're in stock. It's, some bookshops take different approaches to them. Some bookshops will trade very heavily on a signed copy. I think our approach has always been, it's a nice thing to find out after or while you're buying the book, like the author dropped in to sign it. And, maybe it's been in their hands too. Maybe they've left a little message that's just special to that bookshop. We've got some authors, we've got a little cafe in our bookshop, and we have some authors who write their books in the cafe. And so there's a few authors who've said, I wrote this book in this bookshop, and they've scribbled that into the book. And that's a really nice one. And that's that one specifically is a lovely children's author called Alistair Chisholm, who's just got a book out called I Am Wolf with Nosy Crow. We had his launch last week, but he wrote the entire book in our cafe. And now he's been in signing the books. And it's just like, for a 10, 11, 12-year-old to be like, oh, sometimes he's writing there and the kid comes in and buys a copy of the book and you get to go, that's the author over there. He's writing it right now.
That's amazing.
And, stuff like that, that's sometimes in bookselling, and I'm assuming in all aspects of the book industry, you can feel very isolated. You can feel like there's big, giant machines whirring somewhere over there. I was down at London Book Fair the other month and you're like, oh, God, there's a lot going on. But making these little connections, like we see a lot of sales reps and publishers, we see local publishing people, local authors who drop in to say hello. It makes you feel connected. It is about community. And I think no matter where you go in the world, there's bookshops and authors and writers and publishers, and we're all part of the same big thing. And it is always just nice to say hello.
Isn't that? And I think that's just such lovely advice, because and we're going to get one of the questions we've got later is about the idea of online and social media, but actually what's lovely to hear that there's still space for just those kind of what do you call them, real
serendipity. Yeah.
Just like actual kind of interactions, which that feels really really good advice. Thank you, Adam. And Ryan, so now the book's in the bookshop, it's out there in the world, you want to get it at a festival. So how does that work for you? What attracts your attention and when you're putting a program together, and how does a writer sort of get on your radar?
Crack through. I don't know.
Not email, I'm thinking.
No, an email is good. I do read them. I keep a little spreadsheet that is as chaotic as which I thought was really clever and useful at the beginning, and then it's got so many tabs and cells, it's as useless as my own brain. But for a time, but I want to know. I was just thinking through all that. I was thinking about, I'm very new in post at StAnza. I've only done one festival and I put it together in about 5 or 6 months. It was very, very quick. So I'm still learning how people make themselves known to me. I mean, I think I go to events. I like to try to be approachable. Obviously, you can't go to everything, but it's good to know. I do encourage poets to write to me or members of our team and just let us know what you're up to, even if I can't go or support it. I think it's important to say that, like, if you write to us or we have a conversation about something, your inclusion in a festival like StAnza isn't necessarily about your worth or talent as an author. My genuine ambition I would rather program everybody. I would program everybody that came to me, more or less. I mean, all right, there's a few things that are rubbish, but more or less, I would be really keen if I could just say yes to everything. Like growing up, like in Edinburgh, kind of in my early career, I ran a place called The Forest, and it was a very open arts and event space. And that very much suits me in terms of like just being like, yeah, come along, perform, let's see what you've got. But we can't do that. And so I think it depends on what kind of author you are and where you are at in your career. If we're assuming emerging, I mean, I guess, let's see, one way to get on my radar, win the Forward Prize. That would help. That's not really good advice, I don't think, but that's one level. We will notice. You could also win the T.S. Eliot. That would be fine. I'm not actually throwing shit at the T.S. Eliot Prize. We will have StAnza will have, I want to make it more open and transparent. So we will have a kind of Google form that you can apply or let us know what you're working on and give us some more details. Like Anna said, just saying, hey, I've got a book is not necessarily the most helpful for us because everybody's got a book. And so knowing about a little bit more about your performance practice, any kind of interesting and unique things you might be doing with your work, that would be great. If you've got visual art attached to it, if you've got a music or a band attached to what you do, little different things like that. So we'll create a form which will encourage people to share any experiences they have that might, I don't know, burnish, make more of an impact and kind of fit into our program in a unique way. I guess genuinely what I'm thinking is in lieu of advice, I can tell you about what I experienced as a poet trying to get into festivals. And I'm sure, Hannah, you can speak to this a bit as well if to agree or disagree. I think when I was young, I've never been invited to do a straight reading at StAnza. You know, I've had 2 books out and I was never, those nice slots where you get 20, 30 minutes to read. I never got that, but I did get invited to do a performance called Viewmaster, which was a small piece in which I invited you into a little tent with a musician and we gave you a Viewmaster, one of those kind of old-fashioned clicky click things, and you'd click through the slides of the 7 wonders of the world. I'd read you a poem while my friend played some music, and that attracted Eleanor's interest and she booked that. And so I think maybe one way to go about it is be doing stuff that's a little bit unique, a little bit experimental, a little bit innovative, a little bit quirky. That'll get my attention because I'll be thinking, oh God, that would be cool to have. The straight up readings are just harder. Everybody's got a book and a 15-minute set. So trying to make yourself different than that in some ways. And then like when I would get invited to say the Edinburgh International Book Festival, a lot of that relationship came about because I was hosting and curating a literary cabaret, and I came in kind of through their Unbound series and doing gigs in the Spiegel tent, which then put me on the radar for when my book finally came out. So maybe one of the things I'm saying is do more than just your book, whatever that is. Like it could be hosting podcasts, it could be working on multimedia projects, it could be poetry films. If you've got something else that you're also interested in, passionate about, and good at, that'll give you a little, what would you call it in a cynical business term? What's the word? Added value.
Selling point, is it? Or added.
Yeah, added value and USPs. To be utterly gross about it is kind of helpful, which isn't to say that you can't make it on just the quality of your work alone and the marketing of that book and your passion for it. But it does help to add some things to separate it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is really interesting because I'm thinking like the Edinburgh Book Festival has those like entry points like Unbound. StAnza has like an artist in residence. So there's often worth looking at festivals and seeing where those entry points are. If you're not being invited in, is there like an open competition I can send something in? Like Wigtown does the poetry prize. There's ways to get to know a festival or kind of form a relationship with a festival that sometimes you have to do beforehand before you kind of send the finished book, I think is quite a useful, and it's certainly the way that I've made relationships with festivals is also by chairing, like offering to chair things and being, and then people that are interested when your book comes out because they already know you. I think that's quite a useful, and I think most festivals have those little entry point kind of things, competitions or residencies or, or opportunities to kind of do workshops and things, which I think is always quite a good way in. But I was also thinking, Ryan, like with festivals, often festivals have a sort of theme. So sometimes is it worth sometimes talking about your book in terms of its relevance to kind of what's happening maybe politically or what's happening sort of that gives it some kind of prescient.
It doesn't hurt, but again, a lot of these themes are so abstract as to be anything could fit in there, and I could tell.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like the joy of words. Okay, sure. My book is full of words and it's joyful. Like, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Cool. Like it's good to have a little bit in there, and I don't want to discourage anybody from doing it if it feels right. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it's the most important. For me, it's not the most important thing.
It also makes me think about that idea. Sorry, Anna, you were gonna.
No, I was just gonna say, just adding to that very slightly, because obviously part of my job is also to pitch to festivals. And again, it comes back to slightly what I was saying earlier about pitching to media as well, is that the more you can spoon feed, the better. And Ryan may disagree with this, but one of the highest hit rates I ever have when I'm pitching an author is if I can make suggestions for other writers whose work speaks to similar themes, or that sense, like, okay, here's a panel event. You might not have heard of this writer, it might be a debut novelist, but actually this other writer's also got a book coming out and both of their books speak to these themes, and it can be a panel on a specific topic, and then kind of whether it's fiction or non-fiction. So like, I think maybe again, having that thought of how do you sell an event? And again, go back to the question, why should anyone care?
Right. And that's good too. I do like that when people are like, hey, this I could do an event with these two other people. I could do an event with two other people, like almost program it for me. And it shows me you know about what the festival is trying to do. Even if I don't 100% buy into your concept, at least I'll be like, oh, it'll give me some spark. So something like that wouldn't hurt. Again, I think knowing the festival a little bit would be helpful. Like they say that, right, when you're submitting to a poetry match. I'm terribly bad at this, but when they say, hey, it would be helpful if you had read all of our back issues before you submit. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna send it anyways.
But I was thinking as well, and this is maybe a good point to bring Adam back in, is the idea of the launch. And I was, when you were talking, I was going, oh, the idea of inviting people to your launch that may like people who run festivals or run nights is quite a clever thing, but maybe it's also about sort of thinking forward. So like Anna, if you were publishing, but maybe you're with a different publisher, but you really would love to publish something with Canongate, or you'd want to maybe move from poetry into nonfiction, or from nonfiction to poetry. Those are also, the launch is that book launch is such an important thing, isn't it? To make it an opportunity to invite all the people you want to work with, but to really kind of create a kind of unique. I mean, Adam, what's your kind of advice around book launches?
I think book launches, there's a lot of formats for a book launch, but I think, you've got your classic sort of interview style, author and chair in a nice location, put on either by the publisher or organized by the bookshop. I think sometimes you can have a friends and family launch, which is always a very safe and friendly environment. And then sometimes you can have a big public launch in a big space, which is, everyone who you think might be interested. And I think that's where the bookshops sort of, we have our own publicity styles as well. Like our customers are also a form of platform as well. You get the sort of customer that matches the sort of book you stock. So it eventually sort of like, rivers finding their way, books of particular types will find themselves into the right kinds of bookshops that will sell in, and then those bookshops will host events that will appeal to those people. So I think there's a sort of natural progression of, we do a lot of genre events with, sci-fi, fantasy, horror. We pick up a lot of those, and then we get all of, the horror nerds in, and then that introduces you. Maybe you're a debut horror writer, and suddenly you're introduced to a whole thriving community in Edinburgh that you maybe weren't connected to just because you're at an event, or, even if your book isn't out yet. Chairing, chairs are, there's simultaneously loads of people who can chair your event, and also never enough is the experience where sometimes you've got a great idea for an event, but the chair is unavailable or last minute cancellation. Basically, if you have any sort of expertise or interest in chairing events, there's no harm throwing your hat in the ring, adding to a bookshop's pool of potential chairs. That's another good way to connect with the bookshop, actually, is just asking how to get involved with events. We do a lot of workshops. We do a lot of, smaller to medium-sized book launches and spoken word nights. Stuff like that is, I don't want to just keep battering the point of getting involved home, but the worst thing you can do is not ask. So I think with a book launch, it's often a celebration when you get to the end of a journey, but getting involved with other people's book launches is a good way to introduce yourself to the community as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And we're going to move on to some of these questions that have been sent in before we move on to the Q&As. So I know that we've got a few questions sitting there, and time.
I'm answering one right now. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things, what was I going to say? What was I? Yeah, so I was going to move on to these questions. I had something that I was going to say, and it's completely. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Anyway, let's just move on. We'll move on to these questions we've got here. Oh no, that's what I was going to say. This idea about sort of developing relationships and developing community. And I think what we often forget is we're so focused on our own work, is that we forget that actually we have to. It's about also nourishing a community and being there for other people. And I think that one of the things that, and I'm interested in Anna's take on this as well, about the welfare and the well-being of when you put your work out in the world, that actually having a community is really, really important. And that work on community should happen before you suddenly expect people to turn up. You should be there for other people, and then they'll be there for you. But you put in, and I was really interested when you said about putting the author's care at the heart of your campaign. I wonder if you could just talk really briefly about what that means exactly, and what.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, I suppose this idea that, as I was saying earlier, that the point at which I'm working with, I will meet an author often before they even come to Canongate. I'm now sort of a part of those initial meetings in which authors decide who they want to be published by, and we're working out who we want to publish. But the point where the real work starts for me is often sort of very late in the process, when an author will already have been working on their book for a year, 2 years potentially, and it is that very, very vulnerable point where the book is finished. Hopefully you're incredibly proud of it. You've poured your heart and soul into it, and it's going out into the world, and it might get a rapturous response. It might get absolutely panned. It might get no response at all, which is possibly the most terrifying of the three. And, and I think it is a really, really vulnerable time, and people react to that differently. And so a large part of my job is being aware of that and understanding that and working out what an author needs from me in terms of support. Do they need me to, sort of give them a talking to and actually kind of realize that actually, it's going to be okay, that actually things are not going as badly as they think. And the fact they're not in the top 10 is not a bad thing, that in comparison to everything else they're doing, or, this review or that review. And I think one of the key things I would say to any writer who's going out, again, whether you're self-publishing or publishing with kind of through that traditional trade route, is try and be as clear as you can be what your measures of success are. Like, what do you see as success? There was a wonderful quote from Jilly Cooper in The Guardian last year, which I can't remember exactly, but it was along the lines of Jeffrey Archer and I would long for a kind word in The Guardian, while literary novelists get lots and lots of words in The Guardian, but I'm sure would kill for Jeffrey's and my sales. It must be very irritating. I really like that, because it's like, I think I speak to so many writers who are having huge success in one area. They're doing massive, not like big seller events, but they're doing lots of events in bookshops and winning booksellers' hearts and speaking to their readers and winning people over, or they've had an amazing review in The Guardian, or they've had a big piece of press, or whatever it happens to be. They've got a radio interview, or they've got this bits and pieces. But whatever someone hasn't got is what you want, right? And I think social media doesn't help with this. There's this, and I think sometimes, community is really important, but sometimes the community of writers can also maybe not help with that, in the sense that whatever you haven't got, you can probably see a friend of yours has. Whereas I think if you're quite clear before you start on what you're looking for, like, is it that you actually want to have that one meaningful conversation with a reader who's read your book and says that it's changed their life? Like, that can mean more than being on the bestseller list, than getting the big reviews and getting the everything else. But the thing is, you can have that and then still want everything else. And I think being as clear and honest with yourself and with your publisher as you can be is really helpful. The other aspect on community, I think you're absolutely right. That is really, really important, and it's really helpful. The one thing I'll say with that is that some feedback I've had from some writers who are part of writing groups, which again, I think are a brilliant, brilliant thing. And, people should be encouraged to be part of writing groups as much as possible, is that sometimes if you're part of a writing group and then you're the one person in your writing group who's got an agent or got a publishing deal or moved on to that, sometimes it can then feel hard to go back to the people in that writing group and complain about how hard the process is. And I think, again, this is part of a much, much, much bigger conversation, which I can talk about for hours, to be honest. I'll try not to. I'll try and be brief, which I'm already not being. But I think there can sometimes be this sense that getting a publishing deal or getting an agent is the end of the process. It's like, that's the dream. That's the thing that we're all aiming towards. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people watching this event that really feel that way. Like, that is the goal. Getting a publishing deal is not the goal. Getting a publishing deal is the very start of a very long and hard and often very emotional process. And I think trying to find people who are going through a similar process at a similar time can be really helpful. And again, writers groups can be helpful with that, but speak to your agents, speak to your publishers about maybe getting put in touch with other writers on their lists who are going through a similar point. Have those conversations with people who are going through the same thing as you, because you can sometimes find, I think, that talking to people who haven't yet achieved that contract can be hard, because you maybe don't get the sympathy that you would hope for. And, you can feel guilty for that. And the final thing I'll say, sorry, I have talked far too long on this already, is that one of the great joys of my career is watching writers who have either written in another format before, or who've maybe been part of the books world for a long time, been around the scene, but haven't actually published a book before, and have, exactly as you said, Hannah, been generous to other people. They've cheered other people, they've amped up other people, they've supported and boosted other people. And we publish their book, and suddenly you see that coming back in spades. And it is the nicest thing in the world. I'm thinking of people like Chitra Ramaswamy, people like Selena Godin, people like Travis Alabanza, like this, Lem Sissay, who's also kind of been a poet for years and years and years. Like, there are so many writers who offer that generosity and that joy and that support out into the world, and you see it coming back for them when their book's published as well. And it is the best thing. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, no, there's so much in that. And I think what's, I know one of the questions that we've been asked, and it's a question that often these discussions end up being completely kind of centered around, which I'm really glad that we've managed to talk for so long. We haven't talked about this, but is about the online following and how to build up an online following and how important social media is to a book. I think what I'm going to do, I think maybe what I'll do is I'll offer that question to you about what the role of and how one builds up an online following and how important you think that is to a book. And then we will turn to some of the questions that we have in the Q&A. So I don't know who wants to go first with that. Should we start with Adam? Go Adam, Ryan and Anna on online followings.
Online
and
followings
how one
as well.
builds one up.
One last point on the end of Anna's last point as well is join the Society of Authors. Join your union. They've got great meetings. But yeah, I think one of the things that a bookshop can do for you is we have our own social media platforms. We can boost, which can help. But I think there is an expectation of you have to become your own brand, or your book is, in very crass terms, it is a product and you need to sell it like a product. And that's what we're there for. But I think building your following, it is from the very beginning, from follower zero, you're going to have to start by following more people than follow you. Your following number will be larger than your followers number for a very long time. But I think in the same way that Anna was talking about showing generosity and showing support, you will find the communities that you're looking for by getting involved yourself. And I think that's signal boosting, people getting excited about each other's books, having that platform. It's frustrating sometimes that it is necessary, but I think, and becoming a more digital industry, we are finding it more and more that people are seeing books for the first time through Instagram, through TikTok, through these campaigns that are launched largely on social media. It helps if you have a way to connect with the people who are going to want to read your book. I think a lot of things I hear from authors is that publishers will often say, just show people what you're doing in your day. You need to be an accessible person to the people who want to read your book so that they feel often more of a connection with your book. There is an element of selling yourself as well as selling your book. And I think, growing the platform is the hardest part. But I think starting with engaging with people who are also trying to do the same thing is a really good way to start.
And that feels really, that feels less sort of self-promoting. That's quite a nice way to start with community. I like that. Ryan, what's your...
I don't know. I don't follow social media a whole lot. So I'm not that interested in it. I do think it's a great vehicle in terms of like what Anna was saying, in terms of supporting people and sharing their work. Like it means a lot if somebody takes a picture of your poem and says, this made me feel all the feelings or something. I'd be like, whoa, that's really good. And that's really supportive. But I'm not so interested if you've got 50,000 followers or something. That to me does not translate. Those people aren't coming to St. Andrews. I don't think. That's my theory. So I would say if you're a poet and you're worried about it, for me, okay.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know.
Thanks.
I don't have 50,000 followers. Anna.
So there's a few things in this. I think the first thing is that if you're someone who hates social media, don't do it. For the love of God, just don't do it. It's not worth the pain of trying to force yourself through it. It's not going to make that big a difference. And if you hate it, probably you're not going to be very good at it. Like, I think that is the first thing. Don't push yourself into doing it if you really hate it. If it's something you enjoy, if it's something you're actively interested in doing, then there's a few different approaches. I think absolutely, as Adam was saying, community is really important with that. And I think it's a really nice way to find community and to have those conversations. And, even the basics of like, who's going to this event that I'm also going to, or, who's doing this or who's doing that, absolutely signal boost on stuff that you're reading and that you love. Share and boost other writers that you admire, and tag them in, because then also when you meet them, they might remember that. Like, that's a lovely thing. I certainly at Canongate, like when we're looking at publishing writers, we don't, if they've got a massive social media following, that's brilliant. We don't automatically assume that's going to convert to sales, and nor do we penalize someone if they don't have that platform. The only other thing I say is if you're a non-fiction writer and you've got a social media platform, be clear on what your social media platform is for. I think if you are using that platform as a means of putting yourself forward as an expert, as a voice in that space, use your social media platform for that. Be consistent in what you're writing about, because people will come and follow you looking for one thing. And if you then talk about 15 other things that's tonally discordant with your work or with other stuff that you're trying to talk about, then they're probably just going to unfollow you. If you've written a book on trains and you suddenly spend half your time talking about something completely different, and you never speak about trains on your social media account, they're probably going to unfollow. It's okay to have a personal account to talk about all the other stuff. Like, that's fine. It's not to say don't do it, but just if you're trying to actively grow a following, then think of it as a brand, think of what you're trying to say with it. And again, why should people follow?
Yeah, no, that's really good, because I think there's that idea, isn't it? Sometimes we get those two worlds mixed up, and that can be quite hard if you, yeah, no, thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn to the questions in the Q&A. Oh, I like this one. Where is there a gap in the market? What hasn't been written yet? You like everything's been written, but what is it? Come on, what? Some ideas.
Everything's been written, but it hasn't been written by you.
Nice. That's a good answer. What a perfect answer. I can't get on to Q&A anymore. Okay. I like that. Yeah. So it hasn't been written by you. So I don't, gaps in the market. Sometimes it's about what you want to read, isn't it? It's like what's not there for you is quite a nice start. Okay. We've got another one. Let's just fire through these a little bit. Okay. If you're limited in geography, live in rural or limited by disabilities, how can you make those contacts with booksellers if in person is difficult or impossible? That's a good question.
Well, it's a really good question.
Take that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're lucky to live in a world where you can reach out by loads of other channels. It's obviously different than coming in person, but I think we pick up phone calls all the time, and I've had some really lovely chats with people. Like, I think indies will have a lot of time for people who just want to call up and have a chat. I know we do. If you are unable to head to where the bookshops are, or if you are, unable, or just there's nothing in your area, then, you can, sometimes we get a lot of self-published authors who will send out a copy of their book, which is really nice. We will consider self-published titles in exactly the same way as we will traditionally published titles that publishers show us. I think submissions can be high, but we'll always try our best to engage, give definitive answers. If it's not something we stock, we will send copies back as well, because we know it's a big commitment for people cost-wise. But no, there are ways to reach us without coming to say hello. You can give us a ring, you can give us an email. We do always try our best to get back in touch. But yeah, I do understand that it is tricky to feel disconnected by by place or by disability. But we're the indies are out there trying their best.
And I suppose that's really when the online stuff comes into its own then as well, isn't it? Yeah. About those connections. And so you were talking a little bit about self-published books. We've got a question here about the logistics of getting self-published books into multiple booksellers. And I suppose I'm also just interested about like sending PDFs or sending the real books as well. So I don't know, Adam, if you can.
We get PDFs too. It's one isn't preferable to the other. If you have a finished book, it's always nice to get a feel for print quality and stuff. But with PDFs, I think we only have one rule when we're considering a book to stock, and is that we can read it. We can't stock something sight unseen. But I think, yeah, I'm not sure I can speak to getting them into multiple independent bookshops, but it's the same strategy everywhere, which is submit and stay on top of it. I think we get a lot of emails every day, but if you nudge us for an update, we will try our best. I think it's cast your net wide and be persistent, I think, is the only advice I can really give.
Right. And also maybe doing that thing about sending like a sort of a small press just so people can see.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. I'm gonna we've got here from I forgot to say people's names of questions. I'm sorry, that was very amateur of me. Alison Irvin. If I like this question, if your book isn't a new book, if it came out in the pandemic when in-person events weren't possible, do you think booksellers and festival people would still be interested in doing an event, or is it all really about newly published books? So this feels like this is probably, you could all answer this, but should we start with Ryan? What do you think?
Oh,
Well, you're the first of all.
yeah, I guess so. I was just thinking about this one. It's a tough one. I hate to say, yeah, I think I can speak for myself, and StAnza is probably not in terms of more than 2 to 3 years for shelf life of like what I'm looking to program. And poetry moves slower than fiction and nonfiction, I believe. So yeah, I like to have relatively new things. So it depends on when it came out. I would look at it a lot. I've seen a lot of books that I really liked where I was like, oh, I wish I could program that, but I've made this arbitrary rule. It is quite arbitrary, but it does just help me focus on what's coming up. I think it is my theory, because it's just so much new work coming up. I have to draw a line somewhere. So that's one thing. But I do feel like I've seen plenty of people, like you can bring something else if you take your book and you've turned it into a photography exhibition or something like that. That's another way to get it in or generate some interest. And I do think like your local venues, your cafes and your local bookstores, I would hope would be a little bit less worried about the time frame. And maybe Adam or Anna could speak to that. But
I was speaking to someone about this last night, actually, just because a book has been out for a couple of years doesn't stop it from being good.
Yeah,
I think, for every, 5 or 6 lead title, big stack of books we have that's just come out this year, in our shop, we've got, I think, last time I checked, somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 books. There is the books that that are spying out on the shelves, just because the new hotness doesn't mean it doesn't have a home in a bookshop. And I think in terms of finding events, I think we're sort of back to finding that community again and offering to chair events. There's ways to get your books out and in being talked about that don't involve it being maybe an event centric to your book. If your book's been out for a couple of years and you want people to talk about it again, share an event, and then the bookshop will get a few copies in alongside the lead title as well. So there are ways and ways, and yeah, just because a book's been out for a while doesn't mean it's not still good.
And that's also the thing, like Anna was saying earlier about panel events, is quite good as well, isn't it? If you've got a book out, then creating a panel event or event with other writers who maybe have a new book out where you can sort of jump in with a sort of similar theme. We're coming to, I know I want to pass back over at some point to Kirsten. So I was just going to have a final question, just a final point for us to offer to everyone, which is what's your best piece of advice to a writer at this point? What would be your little kind of golden nugget to give them as they head out with their book in their hands? Just whoever wants to go first. We should go with Anna. Oh, Ryan, are you ready? What's your golden nugget?
Yeah, I mean, I think just be persistent. I think Anna's advice of like do what feels comfortable for you. Like don't be on social media if you don't enjoy it. I think that rule should apply to pretty much any of what we said. Like there's a million ways to get your book out there, to get your career started. There's no one right path. I think find what feels comfortable for you is the most important thing, and do it honestly and earnestly as you can. Supporting other people is great. But yeah, I think you said one piece of advice and I'm just repeating what everybody said.
Yeah,
I'm going to stop now.
Really good. No, I love that. And I love that thing that we're saying about social media. That feels like a real relief, I think, for people that would rather not have to be on it all the time. Anna.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to do a multi-hyphenate piece of advice as well, which is probably something along the lines of, yeah, be clear with yourself in what you want to achieve. Don't take rejection personally. And that is as true for putting the book out into the world as it is for the process of trying to get it published, which I know sounds harsh, but it's true. It's not personal. Be enthusiastic, and as much as possible, particularly if you're on the trade side, remember you're part of a team. There's people out there who are rooting for your success, and you just need to find them.
Okay, Adam, you've literally got 10 seconds because I'm
Oh, good. Keep writing, read lots, and meet with the people who are doing the same thing as you, and be positive together.
And support your local independent bookshop. Go in and say
hello.
Thank you. That seems great. And so I'm just going to say thank you so much, everybody, and I hope that's been useful. And I'm just going to pass over quickly to Kirstine just to finish our session up. So thank you so much, and thank you to Adam and Anna and Ryan. You've been brilliant.
Thank you. That was great.
Brilliant is the word. Thank you so much, Hannah, and to Adam, Anna, and Ryan. Honestly, it was just such an open and warm conversation as well, and I know that everyone in the audience will have really appreciated that too. And thank you to everyone in the audience for your questions and comments. If you're watching the recording, please do let us know your thoughts below the video as well. So I just want to say a quick thanks again to Creative Scotland, Hawthornden Foundation and the Society of Authors and the team at Moniac Moore. Just to reiterate for anyone that joined late, the recordings will be available through Moniac's website and YouTube channel in a few weeks, and all links and books discussed here will be included with the transcript of that recording, so we'll notify everyone in the audience once that's available. And the events are part of an ongoing development of resources around this theme. So even if your specific question wasn't answered, although you did do a stellar job of getting through loads of questions, Moniac will be using all the questions to feed into our future programme development and also look at ways that we can expand resources and things via our website. So keep an eye out for that. And that goes for those watching the recording as well too. Please do let us know in the comments below. So before we finish, just let you know really quickly, Anna is hosting one-to-one sessions this evening as part of the Life of a Book programme. And I think we had a cancellation, so I think there's one spot available on the website unless it has gone while we were in this panel. And Anna's also going to be joining agent Jenny Brown in a Moniac in a Month online course this October for preparing for publication. So if anyone's interested in that, you'll find it on Moniac's website. And so that just leaves me to say thank you again to Hannah Lavery, Adam Barclay, Anna Frame and Ryan van Winkle, and to all of you for joining us. So thanks everyone very much. Okay.